start, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Simon Anderson. I'm from the United States in the state of Minnesota, northern United States. And I'm a futurist. So I'm a speaker on emerging technologies and trends, and specifically how business leaders can be future ready. So how they can navigate the challenges and capitalize on the opportunities created by rapid change.
So, which trends do you think will most influence the next couple of years, but also the next decades?
That's an interesting question. The next decades, I don't really talk about that because to me, that's so far out that it's just pure guesswork. And so I don't really find value in that. I really try to focus on applied foresight, which is much more zoomed in. The next 3 to 5 years typically is about the edge of my range. Uh, I had such a short amount of time in my presentation that I only selected 3 trends to talk about, and those are the 3 most important trends I'm watching right now. And those are the uh, the new AI agents and digital twins, like super powered AI, like with the new ChatGPT and Google and all these new superpower tools that have come out even the last couple of weeks. It's humanoid robotics and synthetic biology. Those are my 3 key trends I'm watching right now. Is the most influential in the next 3 to 5 years.
And which of those three you think will most influence businesses, especially smaller businesses like startups?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think what will most influence the world is actually synthetic biology, but I don't think that will have as much impact on small businesses just because of the capital expenditures. And a small company can't just start a synthetic biology company. It's very, very difficult. So I think what's going to happen, I think what will impact small businesses the most is these AI tools that superpower their abilities. So you can have a very small team that can do way, way more. They can act like a large team, and they really have the barriers with large companies coming down because these large companies have so much invested in these traditional way of doing things, the way they've always been successful, that the startups now can use these tools to be superpowered and then just kind of go around these old traditional methods.
And how can startups leverage those trends to their advantage?
So they can basically by testing out a lot of different things. So just being very agnostic on which technologies they're using and not getting too stuck in any one technology, and recognizing their advantage there because they can change very, very quickly and shift to new technologies without hundreds of millions of dollars invested in doing something a certain way. The other way they can leverage it is recognize that within their teams, they don't have people who've been very successful for many decades doing something the same way typically. And so they don't have all this unlearning to do. So they can just keep shifting. And that's a really powerful way to leverage that.
And from your experience, kind of what's the difference between bigger companies, enterprises working with trends and startups and smaller companies working with trends, and what's the best way for both of those groups to actually use what's happening and be future ready?
Yeah. So it's very different with a large company enterprise versus a small startup. The large companies have the advantage of infrastructure, capital. They can make these big bets on these big things like synthetic biology that take a lot of money to get into, robotics, all these different technologies that a startup would have more trouble doing. Um, but they also have to recognize, like again, like with their leadership, they kind of have a set way of thinking, um, where a startup, is a lot more versatile and they can do that a lot quicker and shift a lot quicker.
And do you think there's a way for bigger businesses and smaller companies to work together to kind of capitalize on trends and innovations?
Yeah, typically what that's looked like is acquisitions, where the large companies wait till someone gets something that works and then they buy them before they become a competitor. I don't like that model because a lot of times they buy it and kill it because they don't want to compete with it. How they can work together is it's challenging because there has to be a business case for the large company to want to work together and not just purchase them and take their technology and kill the startup. Um, so I don't have a good answer for that. I wish there were better ways to do that, other than the acquisition model that we've had for a long time.
You most often work with bigger companies or smaller companies as well?
When I started out, I typically would work with startups. My company's named Venture Foresight because I wanted to work with startups and venture companies. And now I typically work with mid to large companies, like boards and executive teams.
Why the change?
The change because it became very frustrating sometimes working with startups.
Why?
Having run a startup, I understand that world because they're very busy. They also tend to think they know everything because they're brand new. They're just coming into it, which is what you need to think when you're coming into it. You can't know what you don't know sometimes because you wouldn't do it in the first place. And sometimes they don't have the capital to bring someone into like an outside advisor or a speaker or a consultant where the bigger companies have that. And I think for me, as I've been doing this now for about 13 years, I think for me, I feel like I can affect more positive change by helping shift a large company, by shifting their focus and their perspective, towards sustainability or improving their company culture or just helping them navigate these technologies because it's so much larger. So if I work with their leadership, they can make massive changes, sometimes even on a global scale, where a startup can do that. But that's quite a bet that they're going to get to that level where they can do
Long-term
that.
game.
Yeah.
And do you see a change in the approach and even, I would say, how people look at innovation in those companies? And are they open to actually implementing it during your time that you've been doing the work?
Yeah, that's interesting because what often happens if someone is especially within a large company, if they're the expert in a certain area in their company and there's a new technology that kind of just goes around them, they will fight that to the very end to stop that from being implemented. And that's a major problem with innovation in big companies, that the people who it kind of goes around will do anything to stop it. And again, back to the same thing with leadership that's been doing something the same way for so long and been very successful. I mean, realistically, why would they want to change? They've been very successful for decades. Even if they need to, because the world is changing, it's hard to change that mindset if you've been very successful for 30 years doing something a certain way.
Do you have any advice for companies how to create a specific structure or even a culture around innovation to be able to capitalize on the changing technology?
Yeah. So reward taking risks. A lot of times innovation gets killed because people don't want to take the risk and be blamed for it if it doesn't work. Recognize that, like, as a corporate policy, recognize that innovation is risky and it doesn't always work. And a lot of it's going to fail. Otherwise, everyone would be doing it already. And so empower people to take those risks, recognizing that it's going to fail. And find ways for people to be part of the process and not just do a top down, we're going to try this, we're going to do this. Let these ideas come up from the newest employee to the most senior, like everyone in between. If they see some new way, new approach, some new technology, some new tool, listen to them. Give everyone a voice to try out these different things. Because especially with the younger generations coming into the workforce, they have a very different idea about how the world works, how technology works. They grew up with Google and every piece of information at their fingertips with social media. Listen to them, because executives are usually much older and they live in a different world. And so that can really help. I talk a lot about getting a reverse mentor, having someone with a different generational perspective to help you see what you're not seeing because of just your own generational perspective.
Do you think that's a popular concept, the reverse immersion one?
I wish it was more popular. I was a reverse mentor to another futurist when I started working, and he kind of showed me all the different things about being a futurist, and I showed him different ways of looking at the world and different technologies I was looking at. So to answer your question, I don't think it's popular yet, but I think it should be a lot more popular.
And just to kind of wrap things up, I wanted also to ask you which trends, because you already mentioned 3 of them, but we talked before that there are many, many more.
Right.
Which trends are you most excited about?
Yeah, another great question. Other than the 3 I mentioned, I am probably most excited about fusion technology, which is one of those technologies which it's always been 10 years away for like the last 50 years, but there have been some major breakthroughs in fusion. And once you can solve the power problem, which will still take a very long time, then water desalination is fixed. Then all these different AI, all these different things that require tons of power that can influence all of those. So that's probably the one I'm most excited about,
Right.
which still could be 10 years away. But
Thank you.
thank you very much.